All right, and we are live. Hey, everybody, this is Roberto. So, we're going to be doing an episode of the podcast today. And for those of you who are watching live, what we do is we do a 3 to 5 minute green room experience to kind of tee up everything. And then I set up the recording for the podcast so that it can be edited later. And then after the podcast and the topic is over, what we tend to do is hang out live and talk with the audience and do that for a little bit. Today, I also want to acknowledge that it is election day. Please go out and vote and make sure that you're voting safely and responsibly. So, if you can't tell, that means wear a mask. And yeah, we're going to have an interesting show today. We are going to talk about what I refer to as the myth of hustle culture. But as I get into it, and before I get into it, I want to acknowledge that toxic positivity is a reality, and it's mostly a reality that I tie to the corporate culture. I'm going to be separating that from the rhetoric around entrepreneurship, hard work, and work ethic because I'm going to tell you that my premise up front before we start the podcast, my premise up front is that I believe that clickbait journalism is a very interesting phenomenon. It used to be called yellow journalism back in the day, and that the new business model is ironically clickbait journalism, and that they purposely, in many cases, and some of it is not editorial, some of it is just writers being writers, but in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there are a lot of anti capitalist narratives that are Trojan horsed into anti hustle articles and rhetoric. And I found that pattern to be super, super interesting. And it's usually something that, upon inspection and deconstruction, can be proven to be completely false and irrational. And I'm actually going to do that exercise and show you that it's people purposely either taking things out of context or internalizing things in the worst way possible to justify a narrative they want to put out. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about, truth in framing when it comes to presenting an argument, because I don't feel that any entrepreneur who is not a rookie entrepreneur believes in grind, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle 24/7. And you can't see that reflected in their lifestyle either. So we're going to talk about that in the show. And we're going to really drill down into that. But I just want to tee those things up for you and show you where I'm going. And this is live. This is not a restream. This is actually live. I'm currently broadcasting to Facebook, my Facebook page, my Facebook group, my LinkedIn Live, my YouTube for the podcast channel, and to Twitter via Periscope. So what it really comes down to, and I'm going to address this, is that there when we talk about hustle, we also have to be clear about what we are and are not talking about. And I'm going to bring that up in the show because we all admire athletes for a reason. And hustle, and if there is a hustle culture, is the culture of sports and athleticism applied to other aspects and areas of our life. And that is a positive and a good thing more than it is harmful or toxic. But I also think that toxic productivity is real and a real conversation. I think it's intellectually dishonest and a disservice to talking about toxic productivity to make that about the rhetoric of hustle as espoused by entrepreneurs who are only speaking to other aspiring entrepreneurs, and usually to people who are in some type of privileged position, not to the working class, and to then conflate that with the true plight of people who usually don't have agency and don't have a lot of options, and the nature of overwork and burnout. I think that it's intellectually dishonest to just pile all those things together. And I think it does a disservice to the good that can be done in addressing those issues and tackling them individually, and not using that as a Trojan horse to demonize capitalism and as a Trojan horse for normalizing the concept of socialism, which we'll get into that. By the way, this whole thing is not political, it's economics. And I know it's election day. Go out and vote safe. We'll start the podcast soon, but I also super don't want to talk politics today, like at all. I want to talk about money. I want to talk about work-life balance, the reality of it, work-life integration, and how we can move you to a better life where you have optimal choices. So that's what we're going to get into in today's show. So let's go ahead and kick off the podcast. I'm sure I've warmed all of you up. I just needed context. I needed context desperately for this episode. So let's go ahead and kick off the show today.
Welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast, where it's all about educating and motivating creative pros and entrepreneurs from around the world with simple and easy to implement ideas. And of course, helping you create something awesome today. And now, welcome your host. He is the founder of Awesome Creator Academy, a YouTube educator, and the biggest Star Wars nerd you'll ever meet, Roberto Blake.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast. This is your host, Roberto Blake, helping you create something awesome today. I'm so happy to be back here on the show. Usually we do this on Wednesday mornings, but it's Tuesday, and today is a special day. Today is election day, and if you're watching the replay, hopefully that's over with and you're less stressed now. And so, just welcome to the show. Today, we have a special topic. It's going to get a spicy topic that I'm sure the live audience will have very interesting responses to, but we're going to keep this as lighthearted and positive as possible. We're going to talk about the myth of hustle culture today. And this is an important topic to me because I constantly see these articles come up in my feed, and I see these Twitter hot takes about hustle culture and about the grind 24/7 mentality and how it's this major crisis and epidemic. And I don't see it, and I don't see it as such, and I feel like they made it up. I feel like hustle culture is a made up myth by people who have an agenda. And I know that sounds conspiratorial, but indulge me a little bit. Give me the benefit of the doubt here. When I think of hustle, I think of my track coach, Michael Lawrence, when I ran track in high school. And I think of my dad, who was a Marine. And when I used to play sports as a kid in school, and we were always told hustle, hustle, hustle. And what does hustle mean when we talk about sports? When we talk about sports and athleticism, hustle means moving with a sense of purpose and urgency toward a clearly defined goal. It means go ahead and play the game really hard and do whatever it takes within reason to get the best outcome possible. You're moving toward a goal, whether that is keeping the other team from scoring in soccer, whether it's playing defense in basketball and getting back out there on the court. You got to hustle on the court. Whether it's in track and field, like I ran in track and cross country, it was that, you hustle. You have to move clearly and purposefully and with an economy of effort in your running stance and towards your goal. And if you've ran track and cross country before, you know that it's not that fun. Like in a lot of cases, it is suffering. Like the mantra of a long distance runner or a marathon runner is, well, it's time to show up and suffer now, isn't it? But the thing is, what's wrong with that? There is something admirable of that in sports, and none of us decry athleticism and sports or the physical pain, hardship, or exhaustion that comes with sports. And the thing is, the net outcome of that is usually not even anything that's about financial gain. It's not really anything more than challenging ourselves to do something very difficult. And I'm not suggesting that we should embrace suffering. I'm suggesting that when people decide that they have a goal, they're also deciding that their sacrifices are worth it. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. I think that there's nothing wrong with having a goal and saying that it may be unreasonable for you to do these things, to have this outcome, but I've made that choice willingly and earnestly and with open eyes. And I think that that's valid. And I don't think other people should invalidate a lifestyle choice that you might have made. There are careers that don't offer clear boundaries of work-life balance. If you're an artist, a musician, a painter, a writer, an entertainer, a YouTuber, an athlete, what is work life balance? There is not an equity in what time you get to put into your craft and into other aspects of your life. And even if there were, that wouldn't necessarily result in happiness because you have a craft and a vocation and something that you truly have dedicated your life to. So if you have a vocation, or if you have an ambition, or if you have a career, the proportionality of what might be happy, like what might make you happy or satisfied or gratified, can't be applied to somebody who merely has employment. If you're an entrepreneur and you built a business, you built a restaurant, you have a family business, you have a craft, you're someone in the trades, you love the thing that you do. You want to talk about it all the time because it is not merely a source of income for you. It's a part intrinsic to your identity. And how dare anybody suggest that you should do less of that or be less invested in that? Like, so that's real. You can't talk to, in my opinion, somebody who is in a vocation or a craft. Let's say somebody is a pastor. What's work-life balance for a pastor? What's work-life balance for a painter? What's work-life balance for a theater performer? They want to talk about theater. They live for theater. They want to hang out with their friends and quote lines from movies and from plays and from books. You see what I'm getting at? So that may not be everybody. I understand the majority of people are not pastors and plumbers and theater music, like, theatrical people or musicians or artists or writers. I understand that most people don't have vocations and they don't have careers that are intrinsic to their identity and their sense of self. I perfectly understand that. I think that in itself represents a problem. I think people not spending a large portion of their life and tying their passion to what's profitable is a larger overall problem that I'll talk about in another episode. And so what I do think exists, however, is I do think that there is toxic productivity in the same way that I think that people sometimes as athletes and people who are workout fiends sometimes work out the wrong way. I think that there are people who have really crappy diets and diet plans and diet routines that aren't nutritionally healthy, that starve their body of nutrients. I think that there are people who do that. I think that there are jobs and employers who are not public figures who may have a bad corporate culture within their company and might be somewhat abusive to their employees. I was an employee. I can vouch for the fact that there are employers who have toxic cultures within their corporations and in their companies. What I don't think you get to blame for that is Instagram memes or Gary Vaynerchuk or Elon Musk. And so I want to talk about the fact that what people do is they take entrepreneurial rhetoric and motivational speakers when people are speaking to a very specific audience, and then you will have a lot of these journalists do clickbait journalism or yellow journalism and take those quotes and then twist that narrative into something that it's not. And I'm going to read out loud an example of this. I'm not going to name this author and I'm not going to name this article, but I'm going to read you something that they talk about here as an example of the harmful, toxic hustle culture. And this is why I say the media makes this up and why I say people are making this up. Okay. And I agree with my friend here in the chat, my malevolence. How are you doing? Work-life balance is mostly people projecting we should all work our tails off, bottom line. I don't necessarily fully embrace that we should all work our tails off. I think we should all be working with a sense of purpose and toward things that we want and toward things that we are meaningful to us. And I don't think we should have to justify it to other people who don't have to live with those choices or live with the consequences of them. If you're working toward a goal, you only have to rationalize and justify it to your family and to the people in your life. You only have to explain it to your spouse or your significant other, to your kids, to the people in your life who it impacts. So I think we have to move with a sense of purpose and urgency. And so I'm going to show you exactly how I think clickbait journalism and yellow journalism works with regard to purposely twisting this narrative in favor of tying anti-hustle to anti-capitalism. I'm going to show you an example. So I'm going to read this. And again, I'm not going to cite this person just because I insist that nobody go out and hate on this person or criticize this person, because I'm not in favor of those kinds of things. That's why I'm not going to cite the source here. But I'm going to read this to you from my smartphone. So the author writes, quote, "Even popular and successful people push for a hustle culture. Take Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. A Business Insider article quotes him as saying, there are way easier places to work, but nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week. Musk, despite his success, is still notorious for being an ardent workaholic. He gets very little sleep and believes that people who want to make a difference should work longer." Listen to even what they're saying there. He believes that people who want to make a difference, Elon Musk believes that people who want to make a difference should work longer. And again, tying Elon Musk here to a toxic hustle culture and to, in this case, anti-capitalism. And I'll get to why I say that in a moment and why they do that. Here's the thing. Does anyone who's in the live audience or anyone watching the replay disagree that people who want to make a difference have to work harder than people who want to maintain the status quo? Does anyone here disagree that disrupting the momentum and inertia of the status quo requires you to work harder, maybe even unreasonably hard, in order to disrupt and to create change? Because that just sounds like logic and physics and facts to me. It sounds to me that if somebody wants to make change, they might have to do unreasonable things. So if you want to make change, you might have to do unreasonable things like, Rosa Parks did, where you might have to risk your safety and your health and your well-being in order to be a disruptor, which means you have to work harder than somebody who is okay with the status quo, doesn't it? If you're Gandhi, you have to do those things. If you, want to do things to make change and everything like that. I mean, don't we have people who have literally gone on hunger strikes? It's not like that's healthy either. Haven't people gone on hustle strikes? Hunger strikes, not hustle strikes. Haven't people gone on hunger strikes in order to fight for change? Haven't people got themselves arrested to make change? Haven't people chained themselves to trees? Haven't people protested? Haven't people marched? Haven't people fought wars for change? None of that stuff is easy, but it is worth it. So why would somebody think that changing the world is something that you don't have to work hard to do? And why would that be a toxic message? Why would that be a toxic message? It just seems like it's a fact. It just seems like it's a fact that somebody who wants to change things might have to work more hours to accomplish it. Elon Musk is also somebody who's in a position of privilege. If Elon wants to live his life that way, why is that wrong? Because he could clearly stop working and retire. There are people who think that he should stop working and retire and go ahead and take his riches and shut up and live his life, or blah, blah, blah. And there are people who demonize the idea of continuing to work after you're rich, which is kind of dumb. And that's where the anti-capitalist rhetoric comes in. It's because the thing is, who gets to decide what is enough for you? Because they decide to demonize what they refer to as materialism. Who are they to say what's enough for you? And who are they to say that you should just stop and you should smell the roses? What if you get no enjoyment and you get no pleasure and you get no fulfillment out of doing that? And what you really want to do is change the world. Who are they to decide that that's wrong for you if that's what you want to do? Your spouse can say, "Hey, I'd like more time with you," and then that's a personal conversation. Your kids could say, "Mom, Dad, I want more time with you," and that's a personal conversation. Someone from the outside who doesn't have to live with your choices, I mean, they can have their opinion, but how much is it worth? So it's purpose driven. How many people are going to benefit from Elon Musk not retiring and from him changing the world? Elon Musk changing the world is going to mean less carbon emissions, isn't it? Elon Musk changing the world is going to mean more jobs, isn't it? Elon Musk doing Starlink and changing the world is going to be more people connected on the internet and having more opportunities, more access to education, entertainment, more access to people having a variety of thoughts and choices and not being in their echo chamber or their cultural bubbles. We are benefiting from Elon Musk. We all actually benefit from Elon Musk's work ethic, his philosophy, and his choices. I mean, is there anyone here in the chat who wants Elon to slow down or to stop? Is there anybody in the replay who wants Elon Musk to slow down and stop and to, have better work-life balance? I mean, it's his choice. I mean, if he wants that, I would want that for him. When Elon Musk is saying this, by the way, he's not talking to people who want to work elsewhere. If you decide to work at Tesla, there are easier places to work and there are good paying jobs out there besides working at Tesla. If you decide to work at Tesla, you are signing on to a brand and you are signing on to a lifestyle and you're signing on to a culture. When you decide to work at a company like Tesla, it's not the same thing as working at a local small business or working at a restaurant chain or working as a barista. If you decide that you're going to work at Tesla, you are signing on for something. You're signing on to a mission to change the world. You're not there just to collect a paycheck. And if you are, then that was on you if you didn't know what you were signing up for, because it's not like they've kept it a secret what the culture of Tesla is. Does anybody believe that I'm wrong in this? Does anyone believe that that's not true? Because, Elon himself said it. There are easier places to work. So Elon isn't promoting a toxic hustle culture. He's saying that if you want to work at Tesla, this is what it's like, and you signed on to change the world, and people don't do that through half measures. That just seems factual and upfront and earnest. And not everyone has to work at Tesla, and not everyone should work at Tesla. It's that simple. That's what innovation is, and that's the price of innovation. We all benefit so much from sacrifices that were made by unreasonable people. Our society is built by the sacrifices of unreasonable people. I hate to break it to you. It's not built by people who maintain the status quo. It's built by people who disrupt it by being unreasonable. See, what's reasonable is to maintain the status quo. What's reasonable is to maintain inertia. Barrington has a point here that I can address. He says, yes, you're wrong. Shouldn't I also reap the benefits like Elon Musk? If not, being at home, if not, then why would anyone sign up for anything other than a paycheck? Well, you are going to reap benefits, but you're not going to reap proportional benefits because your contribution is not equal to Elon Musk. So you might reap benefits like Elon Musk but it will be proportionate to your outcomes, because the difference, that's what merit-based outcomes are. I don't believe that philosophically in America we have a true meritocracy, but I believe individually and transactionally, meritocracy exists in the form of the fact that if I look at the number of people that you directly help on a regular basis, and if I look at the difficulty of the problem that you solve for the people that you help, and if I look at the barrier to entry to solve that problem, and whether or not what you do is disposable or very difficult. And by difficult, I don't mean labor intensive. I mean that it would actually be hard to figure out. It requires specialization of knowledge, aptitude, or talent to do. If I look at your level of talent, the difficulty of the task, and the number of times you do that task, and the number of people that you directly serve, I can probably predict the outcome in terms of how much money you stand to make, which means that there, I'm not saying that inequity doesn't exist if we're talking about outcomes. I'm saying that those outcomes are easily calculated and predetermined if you look at what produces those outcomes. If you look at your contributions objectively and earnestly and in a measurable way, you will find there's a proportionality between our what we get and what we contribute. You will find there is proportionality between what we put in and what we get out. I'm not joking. And that's not reduced to hours the way everyone thinks everyone's time is equally valued. It's not. Everyone's time is not equally valued. Everyone's time shouldn't be equally valued because everyone's time does not produce for the end consumer the same desirable outcome. And you know this because you yourself will operate this way when it comes to your money. What I found is people are only generous with somebody else's money. People, or rather, let me put it a different way. People are wildly generous, or people are only wildly generous with somebody else's money. A lot of times what you'll find is if somebody were to give you the corporate credit card or an unlimited credit card or told you, oh, spend what you want. And I mean, Mr. Beast didn't experiment with this. Oh, like spend what you want on this credit card. And if, you know, it's over the limit, you have to put it all back. But if it's under, you get to keep it. Like people ball out. People ball out. They're not really that conservative when it's somebody else's money. They play very quickly with somebody else's money. And it's the same thing with people and their thought when it comes to the concept of wealth distribution. Instead of trying to increase someone's capacity to make a higher level contribution, to do something at a higher level of difficulty, instead of increasing someone's capacity to create more value, and have that forever and have the agency, have the skills, have the knowledge for themselves. A lot of people, what you'll find is they try to take the shortcut of just redistributing somebody else's resources rather than building a foundation for somebody to create more equity for themselves at will. And when you take that shortcut, it removes someone's agency and capacity long term, because it's the difference between teaching a man to fish versus giving him a fish. Now, if a man is starving, I advocate for giving him a fish in that moment. But the thing is, when he's done eating, you should really teach him how to catch that fish. Otherwise, you're dooming him tomorrow to be at the mercy of another stranger who may not be so kind. Do you follow what I'm saying? So I believe that people's results usually can be directly correlated to their contributions. So I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think that most people at Tesla have made an equal contribution to the world or to the company as Elon Musk. Therefore, I don't think that they should have the same outcome as an Elon Musk. So again, I wonder if anyone's following my logic there. If I look at my own life, there's a reason why I was making $6 an hour when I worked at the bookstore. There's a reason why I was making like $10 an hour when I was the assistant manager at KB Toys. Anybody can do those jobs. Literally anyone can do those jobs. There's nobody. I'll put it to you like this, and this is not a humble brag. If you take the average worker and you put them through my current daily to-do list that is required to maintain my business, work with my team, provide value for my students in Awesome Creator Academy, produce this podcast, the YouTube channel, multiple YouTube channels, and now we have a daily channel as well. We have the clip show. If you look at everything I do, if you look at the consulting that I do for brands, if you look at what I have to do to manage the ad campaigns, if you look at what I do to put on the webinars, if you literally look at what I do as an entrepreneur to earn multiple six figures, it's very unlikely that you could take somebody who is working for $15 an hour, train them even for 30 days, and they be able to do my job without failing. I don't say that as a humble brag. I say that to say that what I am able to do is a culmination of a decade of experience and mistakes and things. And so it's not that I got to the top 10% of earners because of privilege or inheritance or luck or any of those things. The gap between when I was making $6 an hour versus making six figures a year has been proportionate to my capacity to do things at greater levels of difficulty that also have higher barriers to entry that I broke through effort and time and through failure, failing up, learning, repetition, introducing myself to new things. It was not easy, and it's not something I could have done at 18. It's something I had to live through doing from 18 to 27, 28 to prepare me to be here at 36. It was 10 years of experience and then 8 years of execution beyond that. So it's literally taken half of my lifetime half of my lifetime and my entire adult lifetime to be someone who can produce that outcome. And the thing is, in that regard, it had to be a process, and it is proportionate to the investment of time and effort. It is because I stopped playing video games, and the 8 hours on the weekend of playing Call of Duty with my friends got allocated to an hour of exercise, believe it or not, on the weekends, 2 to 3 hours of reading books, whether for leisure or personal development on the weekends, listening to podcasts and interviews while I work out and TED Talks while I work out. It was the reallocation of my time from cheap dopamine, frivolity, and comfort to challenging myself to become more powerful and to do things that were uncomfortable and then make them something that was trivial. It was getting stronger. When you lift 5-pound weights, it's agony until you do it enough times, and then it's easy. And then 8-pound weights are agony until you do it enough times, and then it becomes your new normal. And then you go to 10-pound weights, and then you go to 12-pound weights. And that's about as far as I go because I'm I'm a little guy. But I think you understand what I'm getting at here. Incrementalism has a really good track record when it comes to things like physical fitness, when it comes to things like your own education. You weren't born knowing how to tie your shoes. You had to practice learning how to drive. Practice makes progress. And the thing is, I believe that a lot of people look for shortcuts. It's why people fall for scams and get rich quick schemes. It's because they don't have the emotional and mental discipline to endure hardship and to incrementally chip away at that hardship by focusing on their internal locus of control and adapting themselves into strength through consistency and patience and discipline, which is why the athlete mentality matters and why I made this analogous to running track and cross country and being a long distance runner. Stamina, longevity, those things matter. You can't run a marathon the way that you run a sprint. You really can't. It's a different level of conditioning. And life is a marathon. Life is a marathon. So you have to operate as if it is a marathon. You have to play for longevity, which is why no legitimate entrepreneur who's not a rookie entrepreneur, who's been in business for 5 to 10 years advocates for grind, 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 24/7, hustle, hustle, hustle. They don't. What happens is people like Elon Musk and Gary Vee are not talking to working class people when they make these statements. They're talking to high level, high earning employees. They're talking to entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who want a life of privilege or luxury or want ambitious things. And ambitions require action, and ambition is tied directly to action. Someone who doesn't want a luxurious life or doesn't desire, like, why would you be entitled to a life of luxury and a life of privilege without needing to make sacrifices and needing to, why would you have an exceptional life without being able to produce exceptional results? And caveat to that, if it's a life that came from the fact that someone in your bloodline cared enough before you were born to produce exceptional results, that's not about what you deserve. That's about what they wanted for you. And that's also fair. And I think that that is something that more people of color should really look at, is instead of demonizing privilege, we should ask people to acknowledge when they're in a privileged position by circumstances of their birth. There are things they didn't work for. But I also resent, and I'll just tell you this flat out, I resent, and this is not political, but this is personal to me. I resent, as a first generation Black Latino American, when 20-year-old kids tell me that I'm privileged. I have a comfortable lifestyle. That doesn't make me privileged. I'm still a Black Latino first generation American whose name is Roberto. My name is foreign the minute it comes out of my mouth. The minute I walk into a room and my name is put out there, I'm less American than somebody else. And that's just how it is in this country. Think about that. You don't get to tell me I'm privileged. I came truly from an underprivileged background. I am a child of divorce. I had a single mother who raised 4 kids. I helped raise my 3 siblings. I come from an immigrant family. I'm not privileged. I have a lifestyle now that is comfortable that most people who look like me don't get to have for a lot of reasons. And even with that withstanding, none of that is because of the circumstances of my birth or because of luck. It's because I did, in fact, work hard for it, and in many cases, twice as hard to have half as much. So I didn't set my standard at 4 times as hard. I set it at 10 times as hard. I did unreasonable things. I hustled. And by that, I mean I moved purposefully with a sense of urgency toward a specific goal. Because my life, in fact, did depend on it. And so did the lives of other people. So that actually lets me transition. And I'm going to read some of your comments here. What that let me do is it transitioned me from not having agency as an employee to having agency, and to actually being able to have work-life balance because somebody else wasn't in control of my time, my energy, and in many cases, how many resources I had available to me. So you see, that is important to recognize. And I do believe there is a toxic corporate culture of toxic productivity and inefficiency. But I want to say this. People who overwork in most cases are not frivolous, materialistic, or selfish. Almost everyone I know who overworks, and almost every single person I know who is working overtime at their 9-to-5 job, is doing it to get out of crippling debt. They're doing it to have money in savings. They're doing it so they can stop saying no to their kids. They're doing it so they can save up and buy a house so that someone can't just tell them you're out. They're doing it so that they can put that money into a house for their future wealth and for their kids, instead of making somebody else rich every month. They're overworking so that their kids don't have to go to school and be looked down on and picked on and feel like the poor kid like I did. They're doing it so that their kids can look under the tree at the holidays and go back to school on Monday morning and not feel less than. They're doing it so that their lights will stay on. People who overwork, the majority of people who overwork in this country, they're not doing it for fun. It is a need. They aren't doing it because Gary Vee said hustle one day. They're not doing it because of some damn Instagram meme. They're not doing any of that because of a toxic hustle culture that they read about from some person who probably is more privileged than them and is writing for a publication and for whom failure means going back to mommy and daddy in the suburbs. No. Toxic hustle culture is not why people overwork and clock 60 hours a week at their 9-to-5 job. They do it because they have bills to pay, or they do it to get out of crippling debt. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 times that's the case, which is why, as much as a lot of these people writing this think that they are for the people, they are completely disconnected from the reality. Completely. You know? I have family members right now in New York that are working through this pandemic and are still putting in overtime. They aren't doing it to go buy Birkin bags. They aren't doing it because Gary Vee or Elon Musk. They're not. I'm telling you. So this is the other thing that I think is just rhetoric and projection, probably from to be honest, spoiled people of my own generation as millennials. I'll be very real with you. I'm going to read you another quote from this author. I'm going to read you a quote from this author. Never once at the start of my work week, not in my morning coffee shop line, not in my crowded subway commute, not as I begin my inbox slog, have I paused, looked up to the heavens and whispered, "Thank God it's Monday." Apparently, that makes me a traitor to my generation. I learned this during a series of recent visits to rework locations in New York, where throw pillars employ busy tenants, do what you love, neon signs that demand hustle harder, and murals that spread the gospel of thank God it's Monday. Even the cucumbers in WeWork's water coolers have an agenda. Don't stop when you're tired. Someone recently carved into the flooring vegetables flesh. Stop when you're done. Kool-Aid drinking metaphors are rarely this literal. All right, here's my answer to all of that from this person. If you haven't ever once looked up to the heavens and said, thank God it's Monday, then it's probably because you're spoiled and entitled. Despite maybe working a 9-to-5 job, despite living paycheck to paycheck, you still can be spoiled and entitled if you've never said, oh, well, thank God it's Monday. Because it means that you are so emotionally leveraged and so emotionally immature that a calendar day dictates your emotional well-being. A calendar day, I want you to really think about that. If a calendar day affects your emotional well-being that much, and you're depressed because it's Monday, that's not on Gary Vee. That's not on Elon Musk. That's not because of an Instagram meme. That's not because of WeWork. That's because of you. Here's why. Here's why that's because of you. That means that you have an external locus of control and you don't have emotional discipline. And that may be because of things that have happened to you in life that may have not been in your control, but you could really look at doing some meditation and some yoga, my friend, if you have never looked up to the heavens and said, thank God it's Monday, because you should look up to the heavens and say, thank God it's Monday. Thank God it's Tuesday. Thank God it's Wednesday. Thank God it's Thursday. Thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's Saturday. Thank God it's Sunday. Thank God for any day that I have that somebody else didn't. Let that sink in for a minute. Let that settle for a moment here. If you've never said, thank God it's Monday, if you're not thanking God for every day that you have, you're spoiled and you're entitled and you need to get some gratitude and you need a little bit of meditation or therapy in your life. And that's just my opinion. And I know that it's probably something that sounds disagreeable and condescending and makes me 5 points less likable, but I stand by it. I stand by it. I stand by it. And I say this as somebody who used to, by the way, be emotionally leveraged and crippled by what day of the week it is. And you know what? I own that. That made me a spoiled brat. I should have been grateful that I woke up healthy and whole and that I had the capacity to work, because there are a lot of people who don't. It's gratitude. You can acknowledge that there are things wrong, because, by the way, I acknowledge that I was in a toxic workplace with a horrible work culture. Still should have been grateful for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Doesn't change that. Those things can simultaneously exist. You can simultaneously think that the culture of your employer and your company could do better and may have some very specific inefficiencies. And you can simultaneously be grateful to have the day and to have the job and to have the opportunity. You can do both things. You can walk and chew gum. And yeah, it's okay if people want to dock me those 5 points. It's all good if people want to dock me those 5 points. Because, like I said, I really genuinely feel that I was at a horrible, crappy job. But also, here's the thing. I did inevitably end up leaving that job and inevitably ended up making bordering on 10 times as much money as I was making at that job. So it means that I may not have thought I had options. And I'm not saying everyone has optimal choices. That's something I want for people, is to have optimal choices. Not getting political, but there's a reason that I support the idea of universal basic income, a guaranteed income for all Americans. There's a reason that I support Andrew Yang's $1,000 a month proposition. In my opinion, it should be $1,500 a month. And I think there should be state and municipal things maybe even added to that, but that's another discussion. But the reason is, I realized that my problems and my projection and my mentality as an employee came from a lack of agency and a lack of the feeling of control over my life. My employer dictated when I wake up, when I go to bed, what I spend my energy on. I had very little choice in who I interacted with. Again, for the good portion of my day and of my mind was wrapped up in things that I didn't have too much of a say in, but that was my trade that I went into, in the contract that I signed willingly. Nobody, put anything to my head. I signed that employer contract, the employee-employer contract willingly. Nobody forced my hand. I did that. That was a choice, and I gave up other choices in exchange for what I thought stability was. And a lot of people do that. And I'm not faulting them for that, and I'm not blaming them for that. But I am saying that we have to take responsibility for it. And there is a difference between taking blame and taking responsibility. It's another conversation, though. So, yes, thank God it's Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. Thank God we're here. I genuinely think that that's, valid. Now, here's another thing, though. There's nothing wrong with the phrase, do what you love. You should be pursuing doing what you love. And when you're not at work, you should probably try to see if you can do what you love. And if you're able to make any money from it, then so be it. And maybe that leads to less what looks like work-life balance to some people, because again, if you're a musician, if you have a vocation, your work-life balance boundaries are radically different than someone who merely has a job. The other thing I would say is stop when you're done, or don't stop when you're tired. Is that person's saying don't quit, not don't rest. Don't stop isn't don't rest, it's don't quit. This goes back to my conversation about hustle being about athleticism. Athletes don't stop, they don't quit. They rest up and they hit it again. They dust themselves off and they hit it again. That hustle literally comes from sports. Does anyone not understand that hustle comes from sports? In sports, we don't stop, we rest. Like, we don't quit. We don't quit. We rest. We don't quit. And you know what we do? We see things through to the end. We play the game till it's called. Is that not true? We play the game until it's called, right? So that's what sports is. That's what hustle is. That's what the truth is. So, I mean, I think that we have to respect what the truth is instead of projecting and internalizing and twisted it into something it's not. You know? So yeah, don't stop, and you can stop when you're done. So don't quit, rest. And when it's done, when it's called, you'll know that you give it your all and you don't have a reason to regret or to lament. You'll know that you gave what you had and you did the best that you could. Why would we advocate for anything that's not that? So the author goes on to say, welcome to hustle culture. It's obsessed with striving, relentlessly positive, devoid of humor. And once you notice it, it's impossible to escape. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. First of all, this person is very negative and is projecting, in my opinion. And the thing is, I've seen plenty of people with a strong work ethic and good humor. I'd like to believe I'm one of them, even though my humor is a little bit more wry, as many of you have come to know. There are plenty of people who work hard and have good humor and are fun to be around. There are also people who, and the thing is, there's nothing wrong with striving. There's nothing wrong with ambition. Ambition is one of the most attractive qualities in a person, and it's usually tied to confidence. It's usually tied to confidence. What you'll find is, at least in my opinion, is that people are projecting their struggle onto this rhetoric because they're not satisfied with where they are. And then when it's not that, it's usually people who themselves are privileged and didn't have to struggle and suffer fear of literally losing stability, shelter, anything like that to have the success. They made sacrifices, but they weren't making those sacrifices while also just trying to survive and get by most of the time. Anti-hustle, anti-capitalist rhetoric, I find, comes from people who are privileged and guilty and internalize their guilt and feel undeserving of it because they know they didn't have to work as hard as some people did. Or it comes from people who their struggles and their sacrifices haven't amounted to what they think they deserve just yet. And they don't have any hope or optimism or the belief that working any harder might yield anything more. So they've embraced a philosophy of despair. And that's also why they resent the positivity and the optimism of people they believe who belong to hustle culture, people who they believe feel differently than them, people who still believe in the virtues of capitalism, even if they call out some of its flaws like I do. So it becomes a difference between people who have an internal locus of control, who believe that taking responsibility and learning to adapt themselves and condition themselves will yield better results. And then other people who believe that only better results can only be produced by a better environment. So it's the difference between people that believe that everything is environment and conditioning versus people who believe that while there may be some environment and conditioning, that they have a decision and choice in how their fundamental nature plays out, and that they can work with what they have, and they can even change if they so desire. So you'll find it's the difference between the psychology of internal locus of control versus external locus of control. People with an internal locus of control believe that they're a victim of their mindset. People with an external locus of control believe that they're a victim of their circumstances. So that's the difference. Patton James says, Tom Ballou taught me to take extreme ownership for my situation, and that changed my life. And knowing that you had the power to create your current situation means you have the power to change it for the better. I couldn't agree more. So I think that that there's a lot of great books on personal development and on developing good habits, I would recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. I like Deep Work. That's another good one. I think that discipline, consistency, and patience is fundamentally lacking in our current conversations and in our culture and in the way that we internalize things. And I think you'll find, um, I really think that you'll find that people who have a very negative outlook, a negative philosophy of despair, often are wildly undisciplined. And you'll find that they are not consistent in the way that they deploy any of their effort. While they might talk a good game about efficiency, how does it play out in their life and in their habits? And are they purpose driven, or are they merely driven by survival? Because you find also that people with a survivalist mentality of I'm just trying to survive, they're not trying to thrive. People that they project onto are people who want more and believe they can have more and don't believe that somebody else winning is their loss. You'll find that in all of these narratives, the phrase exploitation will come up. You'll find that they have all of these anecdotes for that. Okay. And here's another thing that the author says. The author says that hustle culture is deceptive. In an article written by Australian Financial Reviews, quotes David Heinemer, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Hansen, the co-founder of Basecamp, a software company that is saying the vast majority of people beating the drums of hustle mania are not the people doing the actual work. He adds that the people who truly reap the majority of the rewards of a grim and exploitive hustle culture are not the actual people who hustle, but rather their managers and the owners of the companies they work for. And you can see where I'm going here. And the author continues to say, and it's not hard to imagine how true that statement is. Even if you are paid for overtime, is it worth the stress and anxiety that comes with overwork? How can you enjoy the fruits of your labor when you don't have time for anything else except for work? You can see literally that this is where the title of today's video really comes from, is they're making this up to Trojan horse in anti-capitalist rhetoric. Because you heard it right here. They're talking about the fact that people who talk about hustle aren't actually hustling and doing the work. So they're saying that those people are hypocrites for not living this lifestyle that you say is so bad, and that they're making other people in their employ do this or believe this. The reality is that if you're an employee, you gave up agency in favor of security, and you did that openly and knowing the consequences a lot of the time. And the thing is, it's calling that exploitive. For it to be exploitive, you can say that person may not have had a lot of appealing options, but they weren't forced. No one is forcing you to sign an employment contract. You cannot continue the narrative of being exploited when you have that choice as an American, because there are countries where labor is exploited from people outside of America, where people really don't have agency at all about what they are forced to do to survive. And I think it's intellectually dishonest, and I think it's entitled for Americans to continue the narrative that they are exploited in their hourly wage labor, just because the person who built the business, which means they had the capital and resources and took the risk, have all the legal and financial liability for the business, and supplied the resources and means of production. Oh, perish the thought that they reap majority of the benefit. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't the person who put up the money, the millions of dollars to build the business, why wouldn't the person who went out and did the marketing or raised the capital and built the factory or whatever, why wouldn't that person get the majority of the benefit, even if they're not doing the labor? Why would that not make sense? Again, they are saying it doesn't make sense because they are literally, in this case, demonizing the concept of independent ownership of a business and of capitalism. You will find this Trojan horse in almost every anti-hustle article that people in the media write, which is why I'm saying that they made up hustle culture. It is not an epidemic. Toxic productivity in the corporate workplace is an epidemic. Gary Vaynerchuk and Elon Musk are not talking to their employees when they say hustle. They are talking to people who want to build businesses. They are talking to people who want to be millionaires. They are talking to people who want to be privileged. They are talking to people who want an exceptional life and are telling those people that they will have to have an exceptional work ethic and they will have to produce exceptional results or be exceptionally talented. And there is nothing wrong in those statements. Where is the lie? Does anybody disagree with what I just said? Now, when we talk about toxic productivity in the workplace, I've lived through it. That's real. And that's what happens oftentimes when you work at a company like that and you don't have individual agency and when you don't have any leverage. And the thing is, it's why I became an entrepreneur. And in order to become an entrepreneur, I had to live what some might think is an unhealthy lifestyle for the first 3 years. The thing is, I didn't preach that unhealthy lifestyle while I was doing it. If there is a such thing as hustle culture, it exists in a bubble of rookie entrepreneurs who have not worked for 5 to 10 years at their business successfully, talking really loud during the first 3 years that they're working their tail off to build something, or the first 5 years that they're working their tail off to build something. Because make no mistake, it takes 3 to 5 years to build a truly successful and sustainable business. And you might do unreasonable, unsustainable things temporarily, and then you level off unless you're an idiot. And that's how it is. But that's also true for every sports player. That's true for every athlete. That's true for every artist and musician. Every musician suffers for 3 to 5 years with nothing to show for it if they want to get good. Every athlete suffers for 3 to 5 years with nothing to show for it if they want to get good. Every writer, every, artist goes through that. Every artist, every athlete, and yes, every entrepreneur suffers through 3 to 5 years of unreasonable, seemingly toxic, relentless things to get somewhere. That's how it is. That's just what reality is, because they're talking about doing exceptional, abnormal, above average things. Why would you be able to do that with the status quo and via mediocrity? Why would that happen? It's not logical. It's not, functional. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to get fit and to have washboard abs and to have deltoids and traps and have all of those things doing normal, mediocre things. You don't get an extraordinarily robust specimen of physical fitness. You don't get a Greek statue, doing beer belly habits and a beer belly lifestyle. You don't get washboard abs with a beer belly lifestyle. That's the soundbite. The soundbite is you don't get washboard abs with a beer belly lifestyle. So no, the people who talk about hustle and exceptional results and those things, they're not talking to the lowest paid employee in their organization. And yeah, those people are going to work hard 40, 50, 60 hours, do overtime, and they're not going to get the same benefit as the CEO. They also didn't pony up the equity that the CEO did. They didn't take the risk that the CEO did. If they did, they would own the company. That's how it is. That's how it is. If you want to make Elon Musk money, do Elon Musk things. Don't be the janitor at Tesla. Did I say something wrong? Do you think I'd make 6 figures still working at Borders bookstore in the mall? You think I'd make 6 figures or would I still be making $6 an hour? See, I could do high school Roberto Blake things, or I can do 36-year-old Roberto Blake things, and they're drastically different. My outcomes in life are entirely predicated on the gap of my contribution at this point in my life versus previous points in my life, and the skills required to be able to make those contributions. The money I was able to make after learning how to code was significantly more than the money I made before learning how to code. You know, working out's uncomfortable. Learning to tie your shoes is uncomfortable. Learning to drive is anxiety inducing. It's all worth it. It's not easy. It is worth it. I mean, why should things be now? Again, we can make things easier. I think people should have an easier life than they currently have, and I think that technology and automation dictates that we should. I don't think people should be beast of burden. But I also think people won't even have the option in about 10, 15 years of being beast of burden, maybe 2025, because I think automation will displace so many labor-based jobs. I think that automation will displace so many labor-based jobs that a lot of people will not have the option of the jobs that they are complaining about currently. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And I think that it will usher in a lot of people having to become more independent and either go into trade-based professions as contractors, become freelancers like I did, or then build a business like I did, or find alternative lifestyles of income or become I think that we're moving to that. I think the pandemic shows us that. I think the pandemic shows us that when the option of trading time for money isn't even there, that one, people become increasingly grateful for the opportunity that they no longer have. You know, right now I know somebody who's going through. I know somebody who has anxiety, and because they're waiting to hear back if they're going to be laid off. I know somebody who's waiting for a phone call where it's a flip of a coin as to whether they got laid off. And they've complained for years about their job, and now all they pray for every day is that they get to keep this job because they don't want to lose what they have. Do you realize that hardship is so ridiculously humbling that anything that we complain about, we wish we can go back to the minute that that hardship shows up? The minute that our circumstances change for the worse, we immediately go, you know what? A week ago wasn't so bad. Whatever I was complaining about a week ago, it ain't so bad. Can I just go back to a week ago? Everybody, the minute something gets, like, the minute that happens, the minute you hear the words, you're fired, you keep thinking back to a month ago and just wish that you could go back to that moment when you felt safe. I mean, that's real. That's real. So again, I say we have, in many cases, an abusive work culture. I think saying it's exploitive or suggesting that capitalism is exploited is a little intellectually dishonest. And I think, coming from an immigrant family, that I can tell you some fun stories about that. You know, I think telling you as a person of color in America, my experiences as an entrepreneur, that and as an employee, that I can tell you that I do believe that work ethic matters. And I do believe that, I'm being careful with my words here for a reason. I believe that life itself tends to reward us in proportion to our contributions. What I do believe is we also have a misplaced and very self-aggrandizing view, maybe even a delusional view, of the value of those contributions that isn't measured in an objective way, in a reasonable way. You know, how much value do you create for people? And how many people do you create value for? It's important. There are people who call YouTubers and streamers and entertainers privileged and entitled. I agree with the entitled part. in some cases or in specific instances of acting entitled in those moments. I won't necessarily attribute it to the whole of someone's character unless it is a recurring and consistent pattern, because I think that that's unfair. And I like to be fair. As for being privileged, I think that people mistake the concept of comfort versus privilege. Privilege is supposed to be reserved for the idea that your circumstances, the benefits, and the opportunities you have came through the circumstances of your birth and were largely or wholly unearned. Primary example, you're born royal. You have wealth and riches for no reason. You didn't earn that. You are born into the majority of a population. There's favor granted to you through no effort of your own. You're born in a country with freedom versus a country without freedom. Congratulations, your parents had sex in one place instead of the other. That wasn't earned. You see, it's this idea of being given a special experience of life and in the world through no effort or contribution of your own. That is what it means to actually be privileged. It is to have power, authority, or resources that were granted and not earned, that were conveyed upon you, that were given and not earned. There was no exchange of value. There was no contribution that produced the result that you have. That's what privilege is. But privilege in 2020 has become a euphemism for you're more comfortable than me. You have it better than me. You make more money than me. You have more things than me. You don't work as hard as me. Privilege has become abused as a word and misused as a word, and has become a stand-in for whatever grievance you have with somebody. So that's something that's important for me to say as somebody, especially as a person of color and somebody as a Black Latino entrepreneur in America. I think it's important for me to help you understand that if you are not somebody that's the same as me, for example, or if you're not like a brown woman in America or something like that, that the reality is if we close the economic gap between you and I, or, a brown Muslim woman in America, if we close the financial gap and you're somebody who's not a person of color, we would still have a completely different and a disproportionate experience in this country if we all made the same amount of money. If you take somebody who's not me, okay, let's say you take my friend Austin. You take my friend Austin, you take me, and you take another friend of mine, you take my friend Andy, she's Latina, right? Austin is, a European American. He's going to have a different experience than me and Andy, even if all of us were to make the same $100,000 a year. That's the difference. Me and Austin are going to have a different experience than Andy because we're men and she's a woman and is going to have different experiences and be treated differently. Andy is an immigrant. I'm first generation. I don't have an accent and I don't slip into Spanish. And so Andy is going to be treated differently as an immigrant than I'm going to be treated as first generation. So relative to Andy, I have privilege as a man and I have privilege as a natural born American versus an actual immigrant. I'm first generation. I have privilege compared to my parents. I was also born in a generation with more opportunity. I have privilege compared to my parents and grandparents who came to this country with nothing. You see? Because that's the difference is what was conveyed through circumstance and through birth and things of that nature versus what was granted, and then also what was achieved through effort, what was achieved through your contributions, what was achieved by your own hand. You see, that's the difference. That is the difference. So it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of perspective. And we've lost so much perspective and nuance in this time because of people being traumatized and therefore more sensitive and being more emotionally leveraged, and it's allowed these diatribes, these rhetorics, these in my opinion, um, pieces of misinformation to flourish and to breed um, divisiveness and to breed um, like just so much of a toxic mentality. It's really hard to watch in some cases to see people believe that they are entirely victims of their circumstances and that they can't be champions through their mindset and by their own hand, and that they genuinely believe that their lives cannot be better without the world changing or without an outside force acting on their behalf. You are the agent of change you've been looking for in your life. You are your own champion. You are the best advocate for you. You are the gladiator that you've been hoping for. You don't need somebody to rescue you. You don't need somebody to save you. Now, there are things that are beyond your control, but it's important for you to have a realistic idea of what is beyond your control and what is not beyond your control. Your earning potential, your capacity to earn, it need not be at the discretion or the mercy of your current employer. Is it so impossible that you could sacrifice your nights and weekends? And this is why they're going to call, oh, you're into toxic hustle culture. No, is it so wrong or so terrible to say that maybe for 90 days you should sacrifice Netflix and your nights and weekends to put yourself in a position to escape a job you hate and be in a position to go after your dream job? Why wouldn't you do that? Is that any different than telling someone, hey, you've got to cut all of your hobbies and you've got to study and buckle down and get your grades up, and you've got to study for your SATs. And if you work hard and you study, you're not stupid. You can get better grades. You just have to work harder at it and you have to study. And maybe there's some people out there who naturally do very good on these tests. That's not you. But guess what you can do? You can just put in the effort to overcome the fact that there are people who have it easier and it's not you. So overcome their talent through your hard work. Go get your, high score on your SAT and get into the college of your choice, young man, young woman. Go ahead and you become AB honor roll. You show them. You become the first person in your family to go to college if that's what you want to do. How is telling somebody that, hey, you can give up your nights and weekends, you can learn this new skill, you can update your LinkedIn profile, you can go ahead and go to some mixers instead of going to the movies, and you can network, and then you can get a better job in the industry and you can get another $10,000. You can do that. You can do that. And Mike, yeah, some people can multitask and some people can run things in the background. Not everyone can, and it's not good for everybody. And not everyone can do that. And you have to figure out what works for you. And that's my other problem with some of the things in this article. And I do have problems with entrepreneurs who make monolithic statements. I make monolithic statements sometimes because they sound good. The difference is we're not supposed to take all of those things to heart. And the thing is, I feel like people like Gary Vaynerchuk, people like Elon Musk, people like me are often taken out of context or taken entirely too literally, or the context of who we are speaking to is not respected and is purposefully taken out of context so that someone can spin their yarn and spin their narrative. Because here's what I will tell you. There's nobody that actually is in 5 or 10 years of business who thinks that you should work to death. There's not. What those people believe is that if you are dissatisfied with what you have, then what has to change is you, because it is unlikely that anything else will change in your favor. It's not an unreasonable statement to make. It's not an unreasonable statement to make. Nadine builds up a point. I think that the hardest thing to deal with is other people's judgment, especially the people you care about, partners, parents, family, that understand what you're trying to pursue. Almost no one outside of my immediate family understands what I do for a living. They understand that I make, and I don't think they believe me. I think they think I'm in like an MLM scam or something like that. Like, I don't think the people outside of my family actually understand what I do or believe what I do for a living or believe how much money they hear I make. Um, Only my immediate family knows because they've experienced it, and the benefits directly of it. So my mom and my sisters, they get it. My brother gets it, but no one outside my family actually understands what I do for a living. Um, People in my family that are older don't understand what I do for a living or how I make my money or how it's even possible to make that kind of money and to also live the lifestyle I live. Because believe it or not, I don't work 16 hours a day, y'all. Believe it or not, I've told y'all before, I take naps during the day. I take naps in the afternoon, especially like before a coaching call. I take a nap to rest up my brain, and then I take a half hour to like do my notes, and then I get on a coaching call. Like, I don't sit there and I don't work 16 hours a day. I've shown y'all my calendar blocking. I use the Pomodoro technique and I work in 90-minute blocks split up into 25-minute sessions. I use the Pomodoro technique for productivity and for health and balance. I'm the dude who constantly tweets, drink water, drink water. You know, that's like, I don't know any real entrepreneurs that they can quote accurately that are public figures, because I think that there's entrepreneurs that work at companies that might be horrible bosses. That's different. Like, but as far as public figure entrepreneurs, like when I ask people, they can't find me anybody, that actually is an embodiment of a toxic hustle culture. They have to always take someone like Gary Vee out of context to do it. And then they get his facts wrong and they say he's privileged and they inherited his parents' wine business when he didn't. He doesn't own the family wine business and he didn't inherit jack. If you come from an immigrant family, you know that you don't get anything until your parents are dead. If you come from an immigrant family, you know what I'm talking about. It ain't yours until they retire or until they're dead. So it ain't yours. He worked for his parents, you know? Um, so that's something they actually always get wrong. And then in terms of liquor store, they always say, oh, he was a millionaire because the liquor store made $3 million a year. It's a retail liquor store. Go to your local liquor store and ask them about the margins. It's 90% of it goes back into inventory. It's a physical retail business. They were grossing 3 million a year. That's not profits. That gets into sunk cost. So people who've never been a manager or an owner of a retail business to understand the concept of margins tell Gary Vee from a place of ignorance that he inherited wealth, his parents were millionaires, and that he's privileged. And you see what I mean? They make this shit up. Sorry for cursing there. It's like, but they make this up. They make this up. They can't even get the facts right. And it's the difference between, you can't really, past a certain point, criticize entrepreneurship without a proper frame of reference or without being educated or nuanced or asking questions versus making assertions. And so, but the thing is, it's really easy to do on the pulpit of yellow journalism and clickbait. It's very easy to do as a commentator. It's very easy. What you do have that I think is problematic is there are some people that I feel as public figures might promote what you might want to call a toxic hustle culture. And they do it in this bubble of the first, if they're loud, the first 2, 3, maybe even 5 years of building their business and making money for the first time in their life. But those people should put their head down and talk less. And that's just, I'm not saying that you don't have the right to be a public figure or to talk about your business model if you're a rookie entrepreneur. I'm saying that a lot of rookie entrepreneurs are not giving advice that is based in longevity because they don't have any longevity yet. What they did worked for them, but it's worked for 2 or 3 years, not 5. And it's fine if what worked for them helped them build something. And I have absolutely nothing against that. And I think in the early days, I showed my process and I talked about things, but I didn't speak with a level of authority or absolute certainty a lot of the times. But there's there's that. Now, some of my friends say, well, we should be promoting a more balanced and fulfilled life, but I think a lot of us are doing that. People talk about this toxic hustle culture of entrepreneurship, yet what they're really talking about is they're anti-capitalist, because when you look at all these entrepreneurs, none of these entrepreneurs work 24/7. They even contradict themselves in this article and said that, oh, well, these people aren't working like that. They're not hustling. It's like, so what are you saying they're promoting? Because you're taking their rhetoric about people who want to be them and then applying that to their employees. That's a straw man argument. That's a logical fallacy and a straw man argument. If someone is saying, if you want to change the world, you ain't going to do it 40 hours a week, they're clearly not talking to a salaried employee. A salaried employee ain't out here trying to change the world, and they're not working overtime because they want a Lambo. They're working overtime because they want a safety net. They want rent. They want Christmas presents for their kids. So it's disingenuous or intellectually dishonest to suggest that when someone says, well, no one changed the world working 40 hours a week, or no one became rich working 40 hours a week, they're not talking to a 9-to-5 salary employee. So read the room, understand what room we're in at that point. That's purposely taking them out of context. That's what intellectual dishonesty is. That's what yellow journalism is. And it's what a straw man argument is, because it's like, no, I'm not talking to you if I'm saying that. And it should be obvious. But the thing is, they're choosing to apply it in a place where it doesn't work and where it wouldn't be meant for. So that's the problem. Smart people like my friend Nick try to work, as little as possible and enjoy the time in the ways that they enjoy, and that requires some dedication up front. And I couldn't agree more. Short-term loss for long-term gains. Absolutely. That's the marathon method. That's why it's being a long-distance runner. It's why it's being an athlete. It's about longevity. So the thing is, but when we say promote work-life balance, that's not monolithic. Work-life balance is not 8 hours at work, 8 hours on your hobbies and family. That's not work-life balance for everybody. First of all, if you're not married and you don't have kids, that probably doesn't make you happy, to be very real. If you're not married and you don't have kids, or your significant other has a very time-intensive career, they're a doctor, they're a nurse, they're a teacher, they're something like that, it's like just working 8 hours at something, especially if it's something you're not in love with, that's not going to cut it. You're going to want to do other things, and those things might look like work to other people, but it also might be something you enjoy. Or if you enjoy doing something, you may not get enough fulfillment, out of that. And Law the Baker, what I mean is, you're unmarried and you have no kids and you're extremely happy. What I mean is, you may not be happy with what other people's version of work-life balance is. I'm saying that you can't apply the needs and desires of somebody who has a family and has children, and how much they want, how much free time they want, how much vacation time they want. You can't apply that to somebody who doesn't have that lifestyle. That's where I think the monolithic idea of, well, we should promote more work-life balance. I think that people should promote intentional living and purposeful living. I think that work-life balance has also become a buzzword that we don't understand in the same way hustle culture is. Because the thing is, someone from the outside might think I don't have good work-life balance. But somebody who actually observed me might feel wildly different. And the thing is, here's what I will tell you. I have more work-life balance than someone who works Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Because you see, doing what I want is different than not working. See, the thing is, because I'm me and I'm an artist, I'm a photographer. I like doing stuff and I like talking with you guys. And like, think about it like this. I'll put it to you like this. I've spent the last hour and a half doing this podcast when I don't have to. I could have been playing Call of Duty. I could have been literally, there's a man made beach maybe 20 minutes away from me. I literally could be at the beach right now with a mask. I could be at the beach right now with a mask. I could be at Bahama Breeze sipping a margarita right now. I am happier doing this podcast than doing either of those things. First of all, if I went to the beach, I'd have to deal with sand. And sand, it's terrible. It's the worst. It's coarse, it's irritating, and it gets everywhere. I think my Star Wars fans got that joke, right? So I would rather spend 90 minutes with you guys than a day at the beach. Straight up. And I'm not just saying that for views or for you guys to like me. I'm telling you the truth that I would rather spend 90. I am not the best gamer anymore, so I'm probably happier doing this podcast since I'm actually good at it than losing at Call of Duty Warzone right now. I'm probably happier doing the podcast because I'm good at it than playing Call of Duty Warzone and getting frustrated losing all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, as much as that sounds like leisure, no, I would turn Call of Duty into work a lot more than I could turn this podcast into play, because I would get really competitive and obsessive like I did, which is why I actually stopped playing video games. Video games was addictive and toxic for me. I'm not saying video games are bad and they're for everyone. I love gaming, but I also got way too into it at one point to the detriment of other things. And so, yeah, I really, really think what we need to advocate for is self-awareness and living an intentional, purpose-driven life. I don't think we should tell people what work-life balance is in a monolithic way. I don't think we should, in a monolithic way, tell people what work-life balance is. I don't think we should judge people and say, well, you're a workaholic because you don't live the lifestyle I think you should have. And I don't think you spend enough time with your kids, or I don't think you spend enough time off the internet, or da 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 da. That's just judgment masquerading as virtue. That's judgment masquerading as virtue. You'll see a lot of that in 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023. I'll let you know when it stops. Make it stop. So, I mean, that's kind of my thought here. What I would like to see happen is I would like to see more people in leadership roles that ultimately become entrepreneurs and business people in the way that I did, to where they treat people that the way that they would have wanted to be treated when they were employees. And that's what also makes me sad, that so many people are young people are I'll talk about this in another episode, but I'm so sad that young people think it's shameful to go out and get a regular job or a 9-to-5 job, and that they need to be internet famous or an influencer or an entrepreneur or a drop shipper person, an Amazon FBA person, or a guru and all of this, that they find that there's shame in working for someone else. I'm only a successful entrepreneur because I worked for other people and I did those jobs and I worked in the workforce for many, many years before I decided to start my own business and go my own way. I wouldn't be where I am today if that wasn't the case. And I've worked longer for myself than I have for anyone else, but consecutively, but that wouldn't be the case, and I wouldn't be as good at it, and I wouldn't be as successful if I hadn't learned from other people's mistakes. And if I hadn't learned, I think that I'm a good employer, a good person to be a freelancer for, or a contractor for, or whatever, because I am compassionate and empathetic to what I went through whenever I was in someone else's employ, and I treat people better than even I would have wanted to be treated at the time. And I try to be generous where I can, to the point to where in many cases you could make an argument sometimes that I'm a bad business person. I'm a bad business person because I literally sometimes straight up almost let people straight up take advantage of me. I've let people straight up take advantage of me. I have sometimes not called in and requested and demand a refund for work that wasn't completed. I literally have a situation as we speak where I paid somebody $150 for work that was never delivered on, and I haven't asked them for a refund. And I know that, and that's bad. I should absolutely do that. I also should have claimed it as a loss on taxes too. I couldn't be bothered to do the extra effort and paperwork with my accountants to claim the loss and to explain it. And um, the $150 is not insignificant. There will never be a point, I think, in my life where $150 is insignificant to me because I grew up so broke. I grew up I grew up in a single parent home. I don't think I will ever like not blanch at $150, no matter how much money I make or have. Sad to say. Maybe with enough therapy, I will feel differently. But I know that $150 is more meaningful to them than to me. And the thing is, that is a completely emotional and irrational business decision. And it makes me a bad businessman. It makes me a horrible businessman. I don't pat myself on the back for it making me a quote unquote good person, though. Because I don't believe in that. I just think it's something that I did and that in many ways makes me uncomfortable. But make no mistake, not recouping money on work where people didn't deliver makes me a bad businessman for letting myself be taken advantage of. It sets a bad example, and I'm owning it publicly in front of you to make a point here. And it's not that I'm afraid of confrontation. It's that it's not significant enough to me, even though it still is not something where I'm just like, but it's not significant enough to me to be emotionally invested in. It's not significant enough. And the thing is, since it's also someone I know their life and their circumstances. And the thing is, it's not going to mean nearly as much to me as it means to them. And I know that. So I can take that loss. I shouldn't have to, but I can. So I did. But I don't think that everybody should do things at a loss. I think that if any of you paid for something and you didn't get it, I would tell you to get your money back. If any of you ever paid for work, labor, a transaction, and you didn't get what you were expecting or what was promised, I would tell you to get your money. I would tell you to not leave that on the table. I don't practice what I preach in that regard sometimes because I just sometimes don't feel that what is in my own interest is to be emotionally that attached to money, because I have been working most of my life to disentangle the emotional relationship I have with money and to have a less toxic relationship with money. So that is why I let certain things go. Now, the thing is, I don't believe that that's the philosophy that other people should apply just because I do it. And that's the difference between me and people who might virtue signal about their anti-capitalist rhetoric, is that I don't believe that everything I think philosophically should be applied at scale to everyone else, because they're not me, and that might not be what is in their best interest. It may not be comfortable for them. It may not be good for their psychology. It may not be good for their mental or emotional health. It may not be good for their family. Because here's the thing. If I were in a relationship or I was married with children, I would never do that, because I would never take $150 away from them to make myself feel better by letting it go. I would never do that. If I had a wife and children, I would theoretically be slightly more disciplined and ruthless as a businessman, because I will never do something at my family's expense, because that's not who I am as a person. So that would change the dynamics of how I operate, predicated on who I'm responsible for. If it's just me, there's a lot more that I'm willing to be lenient on or undisciplined on or that I might let go. But I would never do something to the detriment of my family, even something that seems minor like that. I don't have that mentality when it comes to that. My protective instinct doesn't allow for that. My sense of responsibility, my sense of familial responsibility and familial loyalty is very high, and that's probably the Caribbean Latino culture aspect of things. Therefore, a lot of what I would believe and how I would operate would be dictated by that psychology. So that's kind of internal. That's a culture thing. But see, since I know that, I wouldn't expect that or project that or graph that onto what I think you or anybody else should actually do. What I think you should do is determine what is best for you, where you are right now, independent of what your family, your friends, society, the industry, independent as much as possible of whatever all those outside voices think. I think you should figure out what is actually in your own best interest, what is fundamentally at your core, and I think you should make that your reality. And I think that is the basis of how you should operate and move in the world and force things to respond and to react to you in kind. I think you should legit be who you actually are and live that as earnestly as possible. And if there's anything that stands between you and the ability to live the most earnest expression of yourself that is not to anyone else's detriment, key words, they're not to anyone else's detriment, then you should address those things and tackle those things so that you can be free to be actualized. And what that usually looks like is dealing with your physical and immediate circumstances. So making sure you're making enough money to take care of yourself and your responsibilities and to be safe. Then it means addressing your psychological needs. It means having more self-esteem, and that's usually going to come from working on yourself. That's why I believe that what you should give up your free time and your leisure for, in my opinion, should be good and positive and healthy things. I think there's a such thing as positive productivity, and I think there's a such thing as a healthy hustle. And what I truly believe that a healthy hustle looks like is personal development. Okay, so personal development, personal finance, plus professional development. So what do I mean by that? Personal development, you work on things for yourself. This could be things like your health, your fitness, your diet, your nutrition. This could be things like reading and becoming more cultured, more educated, building a positive mindset for yourself. Then you marry that personal development also to the personal finance piece. So you become as financially literate as possible. You start saving money. You build better money habits. You stop spending money unnecessarily. You stop indulging in vices that are, just there for comfort. And you start making very intentional choices with money. And then professional development. You raise the level of your skills in order to be in a position to earn more money and to work more effectively and efficiently and work toward your goals and to be able to fund those goals and to be able to do it independent of as many outside circumstances as possible. Okay, you do that. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at personal development, personal finance, and then professional development and that rubric. And the thing is, I believe that if you want your life to be better, that your nights and weekends revolve around that until your circumstances have changed sufficiently to where hobbies and leisure of another form, of a different form, things like video games, movies, friends and all that all that stuff, all that jazz, is not to the detriment of having the goals and the things that you want out of your life. I think that if you want things out of your life and you're doing things that don't amount to that life that you want, then that's on you, and society is not to blame. Law asks, is there any low, medium risk, medium high reward venture you recommend to increase money? The lowest medium risk thing you can do is put yourself in a position to have more options. And that's where I believe you are lowering the risk by building yourself up. A primary example is right now, if I try to commit a certain amount of physical effort and energy, it's going to be a high output of energy to accomplish a certain task because of my current body, right? Because of my current level of fitness and stamina, there might be an exertion that is like a 90 out of 100 exertion for me to accomplish a certain thing. But if I decided to build my body, then that exertion comes down from being a 90% effort to being a 60% effort. So my answer, Law to Baker, is I would say instead of trying to go low, medium risk, medium high reward, that we do this. We increase our capacity, and therefore we can get a result with less output because we've increased our capacity. Do you follow what I'm saying? So if you increase your capacity, if you learn skills, primary example, let's define what a medium or high reward is. So most people think that a decent living wage is $15 an hour, and a lot of people think that because they're making less than that, and they've done the math, and that's fine. That's whatever, right? So that's $15 an hour, but that's time and labor based in that way. So what I would do instead, if $15 an hour, knowing that $15 an hour is what, $120 in a day, and then you're taxed on that. So it's $115 an hour. If you work 8 hours, is $120 a day. I would look at anything that is task outcome based that shouldn't take 8 hours to accomplish the task and has a $150 price tag on it. And it doesn't matter how long it takes because it's not hour based, it's outcome based. And I would then work on becoming so good and so efficient at that $150 task and outcome that someone wants that I can do it in 2 hours without trying my hardest. Because then I'm making $75 an hour, even if I'm not doing it 8 hours a day every time. But it means my capacity to earn and the amount of time it takes to do so is in my control, and I've significantly changed the formula. This is how you excel, is by moving from the convenience of trading time for money to trading results for money. Reference all of my videos on freelancing, and then also move into my videos on passive income. Because when you move to passive income, you then are moving from, instead of doing results for money in that way, you are figuring out how to get paid for results more than once. And that's what passive income is. So Nadine Liverpool says, what if the industry you're in makes you feel like you need more and more skills just in order to make more? So it's like you're on a constant hamster wheel of getting new skills just to make a slight raise in the corporate world. That is a great question, Nadine Liverpool. I was in that situation myself when I worked as a marketing manager, when I worked as a graphic designer at a company. And you know what I found? By working at a company, my effort and value was being resold directly to the market at a profit beyond what I was being paid, which means that I had more value than I thought. What I didn't have was the resources to do the job without the company. What I didn't have was the relationships with the clients to have that opportunity. And what I didn't have was the risk and responsibility. So the first thing I did was I saved up any extra money that I was making on the side or from the job, and I bought equal or better resources than the company provided me with. I bought a computer that was better than what the company had. I got a camera that was better than what the company had. I bought everything that I had at work, but equal or better. And it took time. It took a lot of time to do that. What I also did was I started using my nights and weekends to build my own relationships outside of the company and outside of work that I would have absolute ownership of. So now I had all of my resources that I needed to do the same work. I already had the skills, and now I had my own relationships. I had my own freelance clients. So this is great. And by doing the work for them, I also was taking all the responsibility. So now it just got to a point of, okay, if I want to make more money, I could control that because I could charge whatever I wanted since I own the relationship and I'm taking responsibility and I'm taking the risk. And I did that as a side hustle while I was an employee. And then when it came down to, well, fire me or I quit, I could leave with all the confidence in the world that I could scale that and replace my income fully because I had all of these skills to deploy and I had unlimited clients to do it, and I could charge whatever someone would say yes to. I was no longer fixed salary. I was no longer a wage worker. It was now going to be the profits from my business, and I was in control of the price. And I could say who, I could say when, and I could say how much, and I could say what, you know? And so that is the power of ownership. That is the difference between being an entrepreneur and an employee. When you are an employee, you have no leverage and you have no agency that isn't granted to you by your employer. It's at their discretion. And that is the trade for the convenience of a steady paycheck every 2 weeks. It's giving up freedom for security. When you become an entrepreneur, you're trading security in exchange for freedom until or unless you achieve both, which is why entrepreneurs tell you that you will have to work hard, you will have to hustle, you will have to make sacrifices because they are telling you that this is how transformation happens. You cannot have employee habits and employee mindsets and entrepreneurial results. You cannot have employee habits, an employee lifestyle, and an employee mindset and have entrepreneurial results. It is impossible. It is impossible. And so that's real to me. Nadine, you're saying that's happened to me now because I work for a marketing agency and seeing how much value I have. Nadine, what I would say is find something that you can do that uses your talents and skills that doesn't break your non-compete contract, and then also ride the line of how far you can build your personal brand and reputation while you're at the company. If your company allows you to, become an intrapreneur, become someone who works at the company but has an entrepreneurial venture of their own. Meaning that, Nadine, in your situation, if I don't hate my job, but I don't think I'm getting the most out of my job, I would write a book, I'd become a public speaker, and I would talk about marketing and have my own YouTube channel. And I would let the company know, hey, I want to teach young marketers and young women who want to get into the world of marketing. I want to talk to them on YouTube. Is that okay? And you guys have a problem with that? And I just wanted to be transparent with you. And they're going to probably say, sure, why not? And they're probably going to think no one's going to watch. And then you start a YouTube channel teaching, and I would go niche. I would, in your situation, I'm not telling you you have to, but if I were you, what I might do is I might focus on women in the industry and women's issues in the industry, because that would give me the leverage of a niche vertical to be impactful in and not feel generic, right? And the same thing for the other platforms. Nadine, I would literally just make it about the fact that you want to advocate for women in the industry. And I really doubt in 2020 your bosses are going to come at you sideways for it. But I would be transparent with them. But I would start first. And then I think it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. I think it's better to ask forgiveness than ask permission. I would start with some posts that are very empowerment driven and feel very benign. And I would build your personal brand. I'd build your personal brand, and I would talk to solopreneurs and side hustle bosses, but I would start to talk largely to a female demographic because I feel there's leverage there. I think there's a need and a demand for there. And I'm not saying it couldn't be that men benefit, but I think you can specifically speak to the experiences of women. And I think that there is a demand for that to be the forefront of messaging right now. And I really doubt that your boss is going to tell you to stop that. I really doubt your boss is going to tell you to stop that. So I think that you can, help with that transformational and empowering message. I don't think that there's a lot of wiggle room for your bosses to stop you or criticize you or say that that's out of bounds. And I think you do that on YouTube and LinkedIn. YouTube's monetizable down the road. And I think you build a personal brand. I then think you speak at some women's events and groups in terms of entrepreneurship. And I think that on your side, you start a women's network Facebook group for women in business and marketing. There are solopreneurs, marketers, hustlers, et cetera, et cetera. Because again, they're not going to tell you, shut down your Facebook group that empowers women. Like, I really don't think your boss is going to tell you, hey, shut down your Facebook group that empowers women in business. Like, I don't think they're going to do that. So again, I would move in these specific intentional ways and build a base and build this leverage. And I would then write a book that I know people are going to support, probably release it on your birthday, but take pre-orders, become an overnight Amazon bestseller. And then I would, if I were you, I would know that I have the agency now because I would know, all right, I have a network of women side hustlers, female entrepreneurs, and marketers. So I have contacts and I have people who, if I ever decide to go solo, would be clients. I've built my brand so people know that I have the ability to market and build a brand. I work for my company and my employer, and there's a lot. And Shay Slaughter asks, you're really leaning into this women's empowerment thing. Why is that so important? I would say it for anybody that building a target audience and niche demographic is important for anybody because algorithms look for the concept of a target audience. And I also think that speaking to individual experience with authority is a faster track to relevancy. It's a faster track to relevancy. So there's leverage there and it's easier to market and it's easier to promote if you go in that direction. It's also faster and it's more scalable. And you start with the foundation, in my opinion, of something that's the closest to speaking to someone exactly like you. And you build on top of that, in my opinion. It's also a vertical that isn't saturated. That's the other reason. It's not a vertical that's saturated. That's the reason, that I'm leaning into the women's empowerment thing. It also is something that is harder to say is directly competitive from the motivational and empowerment component directly with the work that Nadine does for her employer. So it's strategic in that regard too. So that's why I'm leaning heavily into that, is because I know it would work and I know it provides the necessary coverage and I know that it is strategically viable. I also know there's not a lot of saturation, and I know that is also a fast track, not a shortcut, but a fast track. So I look for how to best optimize anything and everything. I look for how to best optimize everything and anything. It's not an accident that from the beginning of his career, Gary Vaynerchuk leaned into his immigrant background and what it means to come to America and to pursue the American dream and the immigrant family and his humble beginnings. It's not an accident that that's a big component of his brand. It's not an accident. I would tell anybody to play to their strengths and to their lived experiences. It makes sense, and it's super authentic. So, like, you know, um, you speak to your authentic truths. You obviously don't undermine your company and your employer. And again, I think that you go transparent. And so, if the thing that you guys do is service corporations, then you servicing individual people, again, I think that's fine. So the thing is, I just think that you're transparent about it. I think you build up yourself and you build a strong personal professional brand, Nadine. And then I think that that gives you tremendous individual leverage and agency. I also think that if you do YouTube, you start to begin passive income. You can do ad revenue and you can do affiliate marketing there. And then I also think that if you write a book, that your Facebook group and your LinkedIn people and your YouTube followers will support it. So you'll have royalty income from that. And so I believe in diversifying and building that out. And then if you build an actual formal business rather than a profitable personal brand, you'll know that you'll have a network because of your Facebook group and your LinkedIn following of people who can become your clients or your customers if you ever decide to do services or put out information-based products. So that is my thought specifically for Nadine. And it just, again, I didn't mean to give you a consult or anything like that. It's just you got my brain turning and I couldn't help myself. So that happens. Lamar says 9 to 5 also end up coming after employees that make waves, making sure the employee doesn't shed a bad light on the company or compete with the employer. Yes, no, I agree with that. Not all companies are like that, though. Some companies actually like having influencer advocates within their organization and having top talent. Also, raising your equity makes it easier to negotiate and have leverage later in some cases, because if you become a name or a face within the industry, then you'll have people who start headhunting for you, and then your prices go up, your rates go up, your salary can go up. So I've known people to do that. I've known people to work for a company, but then also become a best-selling author, and then get offer letters from competing companies for like, hey, when's your contract renewing or whatever, we'd like to have a conversation. And what happens is retaining talent becomes a lot of a bidding war. You can, like, I would say to anybody who's an employee, anyone who's an employee, is it worth giving up 5 hours a week of whatever your leisure or hobbies is to put yourself in a position to where even if you want to stay a 9 to 5 employee, what would it be like to create a bidding war for yourself? What would it be like to make yourself such a commodity that you create a bidding war for who gets to hire you? If you want to work your way up the corporate ladder, I think that giving up Netflix is worth creating a bidding war. I told this same advice a couple of years ago to my best friend, and they went from a situation of like, having this debt and having stuff to where within 3 years they were able to get to build their dream house. The husband's going into real estate himself, and credit card debt is about to vanish. Student loans are gone. Like, I mean, there's so much that you can do if you create leverage for yourself, but creating leverage for yourself will come at the expense of leisure. That's actually a very good soundbite. Leverage will come at the expense of leisure. Creating leverage will come at the expense of letting go of leisure. I'm not against people enjoying their lives and having fun on their nights and weekends. I think that you're not limited to your nights and weekends, though, if you create enough leverage. And that might mean sacrificing nights and weekends now in order to claw back 3 or 4 days a week later. And isn't that worth it? Isn't that worth it? Like, think about it. Is like, I genuinely believe that a season of hustle is preferable to a lifetime of hardship. I think a season of hustle is preferable to a lifetime of hardship. I genuinely believe that. So I believe that leverage will come at the cost of leisure. And I believe that's your responsibility, if you want to pursue the life that you want, to create the leverage required to get it. Because I don't think it's going to be given to you. I don't think someone's going to generously hand it to you. And even if they did, you'd never really own it. you'd never really own it, and you'd never really feel secure or safe if you know it was granted, because it can be rescinded at that point. But if you earned it and achieved it through your own hand, even if you lost it through some twist of fate, you'd know that you could get it all back because you did it before. And you did it before when you were naive and green and ignorant and had no experience and no connections and no resources, and when you didn't even know that how it would work out. Once you've done it before, you can do it again if it wasn't luck. And the thing is, people's philosophy of despair is predicated on how much they accredit things to luck versus accrediting them to the effort that they've made through their discipline, their consistency, and their patience. In short, it's a lack of faith. You'll find that people who have a philosophy of despair come up short when it comes to their faith in themselves or in their purpose or in anything. I know that because I used to be someone who had, the faith of a mustard seed. Like, I know that. I know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that people who embrace a philosophy of despair have a lack of faith, because that's why I was an angry young man throughout my 20s. I was an angry young man throughout my 20s. I've been very open about that and about my struggles with mental health and depression and what the trauma of being broke and struggling meant for me and my family. I've been very vocal and very open and transparent about that. I make no secret about it. And it resulted in anger and bitterness and sadness and frustration. And it made me a very bad, toxic person to some people in my life. Excuse me. And so I know of what I speak when I say that. But transformation is still possible for you if you're in those dire circumstances that are affecting your mentality and your mindset. I wasn't a victim of my circumstances. I was a victim of my mindset. And the thing is, if I had had a mentor, if I had had this podcast, or if I had had the future version of me to tell me differently, if I knew better, I could have done better. If I had known better, I could have done better. It wouldn't have been easy, but it would have been worth it. It would have been worth it to pursue. And that's kind of the thought that I want to leave you with today, is that, I'm not saying it'll be easy. I would never say that it's going to be easy, but I'll tell you that it's worth it. Yep. And so that's where I'm going to end today's episode of the podcast itself. And we've done so much in terms of chatting and Q&A today in the live portion of this. Probably be interesting for the replay folks, that I think I am going to end it here, and then we're only going to do maybe 5 or 10 minutes of goodbyes, and then we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to go on with the rest of the day. And I hope you guys do too. And I thank you for spending your morning with me. So that's it for today. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast and also to the Clips channel. Give us a rating and review over on iTunes. The new episodes will be up soon. I know that I'm behind on that. But as always, thank you so much for listening and spending time with me. Thank you for all the questions in the live Q&A. And I will see you maybe even tomorrow. We might do another episode tomorrow. And don't forget to tune in Friday to a special recorded episode where I interview a special guest. We have that returning to the podcast. We have the one and only Sarah Dici, rhymes with Peachy, my good friend of the last 4 years, a tremendous creator, a tremendous female entrepreneur, and you'll love the conversation that we had. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Are you an entrepreneur?
Oh, wait.
This episode has ended, but your creative journey continues. Visit createsomethingawesomeToday.com and access all links and resources mentioned in today's show, all designed to help you create something awesome today.
All right, and that's so that my editor, or if I'm editing it, can know exactly where the ending is for the show. Yeah, I think that was a great show, you guys. Thank you for indulging me. I know that the title for today's episode borders a little bit on the more aggressive and clickbaity side. Um, but you know, I feel that it was a good show. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed spending time with you this morning. And I know a lot of you are stressed about, like election stuff or life in general and what have you. Um, I have a 1 o'clock today, so I'm not going to stay too long. I feel like it was a really strong episode. I feel like it was one of the best episodes. And I think I made the main points that I wanted to make. And I think, um, there's some people who will agree to disagree on a lot of this, and that's fine. And I know it. I know that not everyone agrees, and I know that a lot of people have their feelings about the economic situation and about things like you know, capitalism and so on and so forth. But someone coming from immigrant background here, somebody is a person of color in America, I feel very strongly about the fact that I think we could have human-centered capitalism. I think we can have things that make things better for the most vulnerable people. I think the biggest problem or flaw in our current system is not necessarily, I mean, we could deal with the people cheating, but I think it's actually faster to just actually get most people who are struggling the rule book, because I don't have to, for me to win, nobody has to lose. And that only happened when I realized that I could work toward a win condition independent of other people, and I could learn the rule book inside out. And then at that point, someone who's cheating isn't even good at the game. They're not going to beat me. Like, someone who's cheating isn't even good at the game. Once I've memorized the rule book and my strategy accounts for the fact that they're cheating and I know how they're cheating, like, it's going to be really hard for them to beat me, even with cheating. They'd be better served actually getting good at the game at that point. Like, so, and that's why I don't focus on, like, I mean, I'm not saying we don't need accountability, and people who cheat or scam or scumbag, I'm not saying we don't need accountability, and I'm not saying they should be allowed to get away with it. I'm saying that it's like, I don't play against them. I don't play against you. I don't play against anybody. I don't believe in winner take all. I don't care about it. I have a specific win condition that I work toward that's independent of what other people are doing, you know? Like, and I've accounted for the fact that people are going to do things that aren't in my interest, and I've made that part of the equation. By being prepared for that and acknowledging the truth in that, I just have to play my strategy through to the end. A lot of you may not be nerds like me, but like I grew up playing these collectible card games as a kid, right? I grew up playing I don't know if you guys will remember this. This is like fun for me. This is nostalgic. Does anybody know what these are? These are Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Does anybody know about these? Like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or anything like that? Does anybody know about that? Because like I'm really into this stuff. If it wasn't for COVID, I'd be probably spending a few hours at the hobby shop, you know, and I'd be playing these games. So I play these games, right? Just like how I play video games. And the thing is, I'm not even actually playing against my opponent. I am reacting to my opponent when I'm forced to. But other than that, all I'm doing is setting up my strategy on the board. I'm setting up my win condition, and that's just how it is. And the way that I strategize everything for a win condition, and I'll apply this real quick and teach you guys this lesson before I go to lunch. My strategy is to look at what is inevitable. What is inevitable, and what is a mechanic of the game. What is a mechanic of the game, right? So in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, something that's going to happen is that every turn, someone's going to have to draw a card. So my strategy is somewhat predicated on the fact that every turn I know that someone's going to have to draw a card. So that's factored into my equation. And I know that every turn after mine is my opponent's turn. That's factored into the equation. I know that when we have no more cards, we lose. That's factored into my equation. I know that when cards are destroyed, they go to the discard pile or what we might call the graveyard. So I know at some point in this game that cards will end up in the discard pile or in the graveyard. That's a mechanic that is inevitable and avoidable unless something specific changes that mechanic within the game, right? So since I know these things, since I know exactly that these things are universal truths in the world of the game, I make a plan around the things I know will happen that are outside of my ability to control or to affect. And I say, how is it that I engineer a strategy where every time I or my opponent draw a card, I gain some value from it. I gain a benefit from something that will inevitably happen no matter what. How can I benefit from having cards in the graveyard or discard pile, whether it's mine or my opponent's? How can I benefit during my opponent's turn? Since they'll have a turn, how do I make use of their turn? How do I make use of the cards my opponent puts onto the field? How do I make use of the cards in my hand and in my opponent's hand? I consider the inevitability of everything that is going to happen no matter what, and I find a way to profit from it. How would that work in real life? You are going to get old. Time will pass anyway. Now, your aging is going to at some point make you stronger until it makes you weaker, but time will pass regardless. If time will pass regardless, saving money every single day, not every week, not every month, every single day intentionally should happen. Money should hit your savings account every day because time will pass anyway. The days will add up. You should get compound interest off of money because compound interest exists and time will pass anyway. So you should have investments. You should have investments. On a long enough timeline, the stock market's always profitable. You should be invested in it. And a long enough time, the S&P 500 is always growth. You should be invested in it. Okay? Time will pass anyway, so you should always leverage time, and you can't do that solely through labor. The other thing is, since time will pass anyway, the thing is you should know how much time you have where you will be healthy and strong, relatively speaking, assuming nothing bad happens. And you should have a predetermined goal to say, this is the point where I will no longer have the most optimal health and strength and be able to enjoy life. Instead of the default, which is 65 as far as retirement, you should know how much money you need to stop while you're still healthy enough to enjoy it. And you should optimize and front load the portion of your life where your strength is on the increase versus the decline, and exit before the decline. So by not having a plan to exit the workforce before the decline of your health and strength and stamina, that's a bad idea, but that's the default future with signing on at 65 years old. Here's another thing that's inevitable. You're going to need a roof. You're going to need a place to live. If you rent, then you're making somebody else wealthy because they're putting that toward their mortgage and they're gaining the equity and all that good stuff. But if you own, that money that you have to pay no matter what to live somewhere is going towards your future self and towards your bloodline, your children, your descendants, whatever, as long as you end up owning the thing. The bank is making the bet that your income will be disrupted in 30 years or 15 years or whatever agreement you have, and that they'll get to sell it to the next person and so on and so forth. And that like either you pay off the loan and they win and they get all the interest and you pay it on time and not early, or you default, they got all that money in the meantime, and then they still get the asset and they get to flip it again. See, the house always wins in that regard. But if you know how the game is rigged, it doesn't matter, because all you have to do is at that point realize, how do I put myself in a position where I never default then? How do I make sure that I always have more than enough? How do I stay ahead of that? How do I ensure that I have a guaranteed, oh, so if you have a single source of income, somebody else can say you're fired and that disrupts the flow of your cash. If you don't have a single source of income and you have multiple sources of income and you know how you're going to take care of that, then it's easier. If also you're not solely responsible for the mortgage, if you house hack, if you rent out rooms, and if you know that, hey, the people I'm renting out to cover it, then guess what? You also can always be ahead and always say you have buffer room. People tell you not to take out credit cards. Look, I'll tell you the truth. Credit good, debt bad. But here's the thing about credit. In the event of immediate emergency, what causes you more anxiety? Not being able to solve the problem or being in debt to do it? Because I would argue that knowing you can fix your car so that you can keep going to work is more important than having zero debt. I would argue that being able to pay a hospital bill immediately is better than having zero debt. I would argue that being able to pay rent, even if you have to borrow the money, is better than zero debt. I would argue that the urgency of the problem outweighs the anxiety of the debt. That's why credit good, debt bad, but you should have credit and just hope that you won't need it. And if you don't need it, then you should just take advantage of it. And then it also is the scoring system used to show that you're responsible with money anyway, ironically enough. But that's also because, again, they're making the bet and the assumption that you won't be responsible or that your life will be disrupted. So all you have to do is win the bet and put yourself in a position to win the bet. Create your win condition. Instead of fearing a loss, simply make every move in life intentional and working toward your wins. You see, this is game theory. This is game theory. So yeah, Hope Walk Jones says not being able to solve the problem is very stressful. Right. So I'd rather have the means of solving the problem than be able to say, oh, well, I don't have any debt. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have the means of solving the problem. You bust your tooth, better to be able to put it on your credit card, go to the dentist than to like walk around with a busted face. Like that's, I mean, like it's better to be able to solve the problem immediately and then pay off the debt later. It's better to solve the problem immediately and pay the debt later than exacerbate the problem by not addressing it right away and letting it get worse over a period of time and still not address it. You follow what I'm saying? So again, this is not financial advice, but you know, and so take everything with a grain of salt, talk to a certified professional, yada, 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 all the disclaimers in the world, right? But my point is act intentionally and act from a purpose-driven standpoint and act not from a place of fear, but from a place of discipline, from a place of intention, from a place of purpose. If you act from a place of purpose, what's there to be afraid of? You know where you're heading and all of your actions are aligned to that. See, people act out of alignment. I would rather read a book than play a video game. I would rather do the podcast than play a video game. I'd rather do the podcast than be on the beach. Podcast has, for me, this benefit of talking to all of you guys. It's good for my brand. It's good for business. Maybe some of you use the affiliate links. By the way, if you are wondering what I'm streaming with and stuff like that, hey guys, for free, sign up for free. Do me a favor. If you're watching or listening, sign up for free, robertoblake.com/go/StreamYard and get the easiest live streaming solution there is, because that is why I'm able to stream to Facebook, my Facebook page, my Facebook group, my LinkedIn profile, my YouTube channel, and to Periscope all at once, is because of our friends at StreamYard who sponsor the podcast. So use the link down below, robertoblake.com/go/StreamYard. Super easy. Sign up for free. If you like it, you can always go to a paid plan. You get most of the features for free. You just get the watermark in the corner, which I don't have to deal with because I pay for it just like you would. So just sign up for the link. And if you like it, pay for it. If you enjoy the free version, keep the free version, but do sign up and try it out if you ever want to do live streaming. But yeah, building wealth in the 21st century, not a zero sum game. I couldn't agree more. It's not a zero sum game. Like I'm gonna let you guys go real quick, but I'm gonna give you 5 minutes of super real talk wisdom real quick. And then I've got to go, and then I've got YouTube videos dropping on 3 different channels today on top of the podcast, and I've got a coaching call today, and I have a group call today. But what I will say is, all right, I'll answer Michael and then I will get to this. Michael, I was paying for StreamYard before they ever were a sponsor. I didn't love Restream. And the thing is, I find this interface easier to manage guests. I can manage my branding. I can actually swap out multiple branding from my StreamYard interface for the podcast. I can do a different branding for my coaching group. I can do a different branding for my main YouTube channel, all from the same dashboard and interface without logging in, logging out. I can bring on guests super easy. And I like the clean UI UX. I like the features. I also like that they built out a team of influencers to put them on the advisory board. So, yeah, that's a convenience and workflow thing for me. I can put in videos too. I can do so much stuff with this, and I can host 10 people on it. Yeah. So you're saying, that's huge. You have to do different accounts with Restream. See, there you go. That's a feature you didn't even know about. Like, and it also records the podcast and everything to the cloud. I can download it for up to 15 days. I can grab that, and I can just pull the audio version, which makes it easier for editing as well. So there's huge maybe that should do a video on that. I know people think I'm biased because it's sponsored, but like I should probably just do a review of StreamYard anyway and make it a tutorial and say, look, I understand that people are going to think that this is a biased thing because they're a sponsor of the channel, but I want to just show you the features. And if you want it, you can get it for free. If not, it's no hard feelings, but I was paying for it before they sponsored me. And by the way, I'm still paying for it. They just gave me a pro upgrade for free. I still pay for the base model. So yeah, it records the live stream, and I can to the cloud. I can download it, and then I can download the audio version whenever I want. And yeah, the feature set is just absurdly robust. Like, it's absurdly robust. So that's what I like. But yeah, let me give you some advice about building wealth and making money. I don't claim to be wealthy. I claim to be comfortable. I make multiple 6 figures. I'm going to tell you, I have a video about a lot of this, actually. It's like I tell you my 6 steps, but the big thing is this: understanding how to save money is a real skill by itself. So saving money is a real skill. Reducing spending is a real skill. Tracking your expenses and your spending is a real skill. Fixing or building your credit is something you'll have to become educated about. So, like, first of all, those first 4 things aren't even about making more money, and they're not even about your career, your job yet. And they technically they don't cost you any money. It will cost you time, and you'll have to become educated about it. You'll have to become educated about a methodology for you that lets you reduce your spending. And there's apps that can help you track your spending, and you'll have to do that. You'll have to learn how to reduce and track your spending. You'll have to learn how to save money. So those 3 are the first foundations that are built on just responsibility and don't require you to make more money and don't require you to spend more money. They require you to spend less money. So that's the first. Those 3 are their own category. That's about fiscal responsibility. The next thing, though, is either repairing your credit and building your credit. So if you need to repair your credit, that might cost you money in terms of settling any debts or outstanding things like that. But you also have to learn and become educated about credit to begin with and understand the scoring mechanisms. And that's how you're going to build your credit. And if you don't have credit, you have to establish that. And that may or may not take money because you might have to get a secured credit card. So those first 5 things, 3 of them don't require any money. 2 of them might. Okay. So then there's number 6, get out of debt. And that's a long-term play. You don't do it all at once. And it's more important, in my opinion, to save money than to get out of debt, in my opinion. But you can chip away at the debt. My answer would be to attack not the biggest debt. That'll be emotionally satisfying, but it's not practical. Attack whatever has the highest compound interest rate. Like whatever has the highest interest rate, attack that debt first. Okay? So that's number 6. Do these things. All right? The next thing you need to do is figure out if it's possible to increase the income you already have. Is it possible to get a better job? Is it possible to get a raise? Do that. Okay. Your job might promote you if you get a new skill set. You might be able to leave the company and get a better job offer, or you might be able to negotiate a raise or a new position. So increase the income you already have. Number 2, diversify and add new sources of income. Adding new sources of income will help you save more money, and do this while reducing your spending. Don't upscale your lifestyle just because you started adding a new revenue stream or because you started making more money. Use increasing your current earnings and adding a new revenue stream or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and use that to save more money and to reduce your debt and get out of debt. And then finally use this new income to also start investing and earning compound interest. Now that you've done that and you have multiple streams of income, you have investments and getting investment income, you're reducing or eliminating debt, you've reduced saving, you've reduced your debt, you've reduced your spending, you're growing your savings. It's time to start making passive income and automate your income and separate the money you make from the time that you spend. So you need to do that. Okay? And then now that you have done that, the next thing to do now is to look at becoming, if you haven't already, or if you can't do it just off of the money you were earning from your job, if you're not already, become a homeowner, because now you have to spend money no matter what to live somewhere. It might as well go to your future self and you get equity and you get all the benefits of that instead of making somebody else rich. And if you want the freedom and flexibility and stuff like that, it's like you want to be able to live wherever you want. Well, you'll have to, you could sell the house and rent it out. You could either rent out your house or you could sell it and you could go live wherever you want. And you could go and rent again while getting your lifestyle paid for by the rental income of the place that you own and cancel it all out. So at that point, you have no overhead or no cost of living. You're earning passive income, you're investing. So you've zeroed out your cost of living if you end up doing that. Because, all right, yeah, you're paying the mortgage, but you're not. Your tenants are. And if you're profitable on it, maybe they're paying the place you're renting at too. And if that's the case, or if you just buy another house, like you rent out that one, you move somewhere else, blah, 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 then, you know, it's covered. And then you still have your multiple streams of income. You have your passive income that's not reliant on your time. You have your investments. Hopefully at that point you have no debt other than the mortgages if we followed the plan accordingly. You've got money in savings for a rainy day. You've got credit if things should go sideways, or if you need something, or if there's an emergency. And you know how to save, you know how to spend less, you know how to make more. You're doing great at this point. And so at that point, what's left to you is to scale things if you want to do that and build generational wealth, or if you just want to live your life and be happy at that point. Well, if you've started early enough in this process that takes about 10 to 15 years, if you started early enough, you're still relatively young and have all of your youth and health and stamina, and you haven't exceeded the age where your strength and your health and everything declines. So this is not a 5-year plan. This is a 15-year plan. So, you know, that's what I recommend. Have I read I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi? I've read I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I've read everything by Nicole Lapin. I've read the Dave Ramsey stuff, Millionaire Next Door. I'm currently reading 30-something Millionaire because my goal is to become a millionaire before Oops, sorry about that. Lost you there for a second. But yeah, so yeah, I've read that. And yeah. So let's see. Um so those are my thoughts. Like that's like kind of my whole like thought process and what my system would be, you know. Michael says, "Oh darn, Roberto, plan to be killing it by my late 30s, so how terrible for me." Yeah, I mean, it's possible to achieve this sooner. It's possible to achieve this sooner, but there are a lot of people who will say that if you work to achieve what I just said sooner rather than later and do it super super fast, that that will be part of the toxic hustle culture of grind and you'll have all these regrets. But it's like even people who've done it successfully say that sometimes, and it kind of gets to me. It's like I'll give you an example, and I love Graham Stephan, but Graham Stephan talks about having some regrets, and I don't know if it maybe he means it, but maybe he doesn't, because I look at his life and I'm like, you should regret nothing. But I'm judging from the outside in. But I don't know. He said that when he was single, so I think that that was it. I think he said it when he was single because he was I think 28 at the time. He hadn't met his girlfriend Macy yet, and he wasn't working with Jack every day yet. So maybe he was feeling isolated and lonely at the time as a millionaire who became a millionaire at 26 from real estate, and then a millionaire several times over from YouTube on top of that, and courses and affiliate marketing and sponsorships and so on and so forth. But Graham, and I love Graham, and I aspire to do some things like Graham. But I think when he talks about the grind and all of that stuff, he's talking and he talks about regrets. One, those videos were filmed when he was single and more lonely and wasn't spending time with a lot of friends despite being a millionaire real estate investor. um but he also got really into YouTube and loved it and got happy making videos. And then he did meet his girlfriend despite all of that work and all that hustle and all that grind. And then he also met Jack, and it's like he has this great wonderful life with friends. He's doing his podcast. He sees the kind of people that are like-minded. It's like he's living it up. It's like, and those things wouldn't have happened without the sacrifices he made from age 20 to 26. So everything he has now at age 30 was based on a decade of all that stuff, and he's in a wonderful, healthy, loving relationship, has a great friendship and apprentice, and he has amazing friends and all these adventures and this wonderful life story. And he's only in his first decade of adulthood, which is mad impressive and mad respectable, and I love him for that. So I think resenting the vehicle or that got you there, like I think 6 years of giving up like your 20s or whatever it is that he like did it, like 6, 7, or 8 years of giving up your 20s and hustling and grinding and being lonely and saying, man, I'm a workaholic and all that stuff, in order to have the lifestyle and the relationships and everything he has forever in perpetuity going forward. That's a good trade. It's a really good trade. You know what I'm saying? Um, the lifestyle that I have right now and have had for the last couple of like years, I look at everything I went through and I'm like, that's a good trade. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm not even a millionaire. I'm not even close. And I'm like, that's a good trade. I don't undo any of that. It's like, that's a good trade, you know? So if I'm guys, if I'm a millionaire at 40 and like I say, oh, I regret how I spent my 30s and blah, 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 like punch me in the mouth. Like if I'm a millionaire at 40 and I talk trash about regretting my hustle and my work ethic of my 30s, punch me in the mouth. Because in my 30s, what I regret is not working differently, more effectively, working smarter and harder. I regret that I regret all the wasted time of my 20s. I regret every single hour of Call of Duty from my 20s that wasn't spent reading books, listening to podcasts, learning video editing, learning better techniques, learning more photography, selling stuff at the flea market, putting money into my bank account or into like not doing stocks, not like I regret every freaking $30 night at the club that wasn't me buying fractions of Apple stock in my 20s. Fact, actually, I guarantee you that without realizing it, I probably in the ages 21 through 26, without realizing it, I guarantee you I spent $1,500 a year in like partying and alcohol and drinking throughout the course of a whole year, mind you, which is not hard to do. It's like that's like averaging $30 a weekend, right? $30 a weekend. $30 a weekend is about $1,500 a year. And let's say I did that ages 21 through 27, right? So like 7 years, right? So 7 years at $1,500 is about $10,000. $10,000. And how's Apple been doing? Let's look at the market of the last 5 years. And all right, wow, over the last 5 years, 269% return, huh? Okay, so let's just assume and average out Apple to a very conservative 20% return a year. What's Apple's current return for the year? Oh shoot, Apple's return for the year is 72%. Let's conservatively say it's like a 25 freaking percent return, even though that's stupid for Apple. Yeah, I'm really impressed with Graham, but I want to show you guys the stupidity of my 20s in glorious detail. Glorious detail. If the money from my 20s averaged out to say $120 a month, and this is gonna be disgusting. So if that money from age 21 and I'm 36 now is 15 years of like, oh dear God in heaven, the money that I spent in my 20s conservatively invested in Apple, by now, that $120 a month that I spent on the weekends in my 20s, if I only ever invested that over the last couple of years in Apple and never started investing more in Apple, would be $136,000 with it in profit, and the total would be $157,000. Like, yeah, $157,000 by contributing $120 a month over the course of 15 years with a modest rate of return in Apple stock. Assuming a very conservative rate of return in Apple stock. I mean, even if I cut that down to an even more conservative interest rate, if I cut that down to even a much more conservative interest rate, it still would be tens of thousands of dollars just in interest. That's absurd. That's a real loss. That's a shame. That's a crying shame, right? That is a crying shame. So that's what having fun and being young and dumb is worth. Being dumb from ages 21, up and stuff like that, or from ages 18 up, if you even just conservatively saved money and put it into the market, if you start at 18, just being even very cheap and very conservative and put money into the market, it's not that long away from you having the down payment for a house. Yeah. So, I think that's a place to freaking bookmark it. All right, like that. I think I might have depressed myself. Anyway, guys, I've got to get ready for this call. I will catch you hopefully maybe tomorrow morning on the podcast, and then stay tuned for Friday for the interview with Sarah Dietschy. All right, you guys, stay awesome. Take care.